I will call the Monday, March 1st meeting of the Hastings Planning Commission to order. We'll begin with roll call. Bowers.
Here.
Frem.
Here, City Hastings.
Yes, if you would please state where you are. That's one of the requirements the state has on us. Zarnicki.
Here, City of Hastings.
Denton.
Here, Nashville.
Foster.
Here, City of Hastings.
Mauer.
Here, City of Hastings.
Rezegi.
Here, City of Hastings.
Tassava.
Here, City Hastings.
Hatfield here, also City of Hastings. And Lois, I assume you're also in the City of Hastings. Lois,
Yes,
you're also here in the city?
I said that when I said
Oh.
here Hastings.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
That's okay.
I apologize. All right, if everyone will please stand and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right, item 3, approval of the agenda. Any
Make a motion.
changes? Okay, we had a
Lois, approve.
motion from Lois. Do we have support?
Power support.
Support from Bowers. Further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Thank you. Approval of the minutes of our February 1st meeting.
This is Toss. I'll make a motion to approve.
I second.
Motion
Lois.
by Tassava, second by Bowers. Discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same. Thank you. Information items, we have none, although I would like to just briefly thank Jerry for inviting all of us to join with others in a lunchtime discussion of the book 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. I hope you all saw that invitation. If you have not already picked one up, there are copies of the book available to you. They're at the reception desk at City Hall. I think this is going to be very interesting. Again, remembering the title, 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. If you look at the chapters, forget the water, don't attract business, don't engage youth, deceive yourself, shop elsewhere, don't paint, don't cooperate, live in the past, shut out your seniors, reject everything new, ignore outsiders, grow complacent, and don't take responsibility. Awful lot of those sound very familiar. We certainly have touched on many of those as we've gone through the work on the master plan and also engaged in discussion about some of the ordinances. So should be a great discussion. Jerry, thank you very much. Anything else you want to say about the luncheon sessions?
Nope, they'll be Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 12:10, and we'll hold them to 30 minutes or less. So to be respectful of people's time.
Jerry, when do you deliver lunch to us? Is that at noon?
Yeah, make sure your door's unlocked and just wait for me to
okay.
show up at noon. So
Wishful thinking, Lynn, but I admire your thought.
I've been trying, I got this little slot in the side of my computer. I've been stuffing sandwiches in there and they don't seem to go anywhere. So
Oh, darn. All right, we have 3 public hearings tonight. So our first one is to solicit public comment regarding approval of a special use permit and related site plan for the mixed-use commercial building at 128 North Michigan for AJ Vaniclassen. Dan, you gonna introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Dave, Mr. Chair. Yes, I believe we're going to have a good contingent of design folks who have been actively involved for AJ Vaniclassen for development of this site plan for the mixed-use building at 128 North Michigan. For the general public, that's where the former Moose building was located. Currently, it's a vacant site. The site plan that Planning Commission will hear tonight is for mixed-use building of office retail on the bottom in conjunction with residential space, 21 market rate residential units on the first, second, third, fourth floor. So with that, I can turn it over to Rebecca if you have any additional comments.
Thanks, Dan. Well, just maybe just a few, but honestly, I think you'll really hit those once you start your review. And I'm sure that the applicants will speak to them as well. But you received the staff report. The plans were for the most part very complete. And I think the Planning Commission is going to be in a position of looking at a few obviously crucial design elements, but that's probably where you're going to focus your attention, is one on the density. Within this district, there's a limitation of 8 units in a building, unless the Planning Commission grants a deviation from that, but your ordinance gives you what you need to talk about in order to make that conclusion. So that will be a key discussion point for you. And then secondly is going to be the parking associated with it. So once again, the way this is allowed in your ordinance, it's subject to the multifamily development parking standards, which would require almost twice what they're allowing or what they're providing. However, the ordinance allows you to accept or approve a reduced parking plan. And so I've set forth in my report a couple of sort of ways that you can be thinking about the parking proposal. For instance, in the district where you allow residential, you really only allow one, or you only require 1 parking space per dwelling unit. And under that approach, and not the multifamily approach, they would be providing adequate parking. So I think as you get to the point where you're saying, you know, what supports our position for approving a reduced parking plan, I think you can look to that, as well as public parking arrangements and any sort of parking demand information they're able to provide to you would all give you foundational support for accepting something other than what the ordinance requires. And that can all be done by Planning Commission approval. It does not require any sort of variation. And then you also have just a few minor design elements that the plan was silent on. I'm sure the applicant, I know the applicant has received this report. So they'll be speaking, I'm sure, to the couple of missing pieces with respect to building design. So that's really going to be the focus of the Planning Commission's consideration, because all in all, the plans were very complete.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
So who, I'm not sure who's leading off for the applicant. Chris, are you going to kick it off, or? Chris, you're muted.
Yep. I'm happy to give it a shot. We have our architect, our civil engineer, and also Lynn Bullock, who's our project manager, on the call. John Blair was our architect. Clement was our civil engineer, is rather. I'll just start off by just saying we're excited to be here. I was actually looking back on when, for those of you that don't know the history, we pursued this site through an RFP process with the city. It's been, I think, a year and a half. Obviously, a whole lot of things changed because of COVID, but it was last fall of 2019 when we originally proposed a project that was actually larger than this. I think we had units somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 units, and some of the implications of the economics of COVID and MEDC incentives not forced us, but it made more sense to scale it back a little bit to this 21 unit plan. The site makes a ton of sense for density. There's, we have our own on-site parking, like Rebecca mentioned, but also there's plentiful parking elsewhere. Some of the items that are noted in the Planning Commission report, we intend to address, and I'll let John and Clement address those specifically. But we're excited about this project. We think it would be great for Hastings. There's a few tweaks like colors and things that we're still working on, but overall, we've got a pretty strong design plan here that's pursuing towards a goal of, with your approval, of course, breaking ground sometime this summer. John, do you want to address a couple of the architectural elements that were brought up as concerns?
Yeah, I think, we knew about some of the, my name's Jonathan Blair with Arca Design Group. I appreciate you all having us. Yeah, Chris, we had already discussed some of the issues, I think, of the building and how it maybe varies from some of the defined qualifiers in the zoning ordinance. But the building, like you guys have seen, pretty straightforward, about 2,400 square feet of retail on the first floor with 3 walk-up units in the back, 3 two-bedroom units, and then 3 stories of residential above. Right now, we are proposing the first floor to be largely masonry, combination of cast stone and brick veneer, and then above that will be a kind of a cement fiberboard siding or very similar type product, wood laminate product. I know Chris and I have been talking about perhaps some metal panel, but we're kind of looking at the cost comparisons of those products. Yeah, and as it relates to the ordinance, I know the height is an issue. Chris already kind of mentioned the realities of the economy and making this project feasible. I think he feels pretty strongly that we need the 3 floors of residential above this just to get that density and again to make it economically feasible. So we are going over the limit of 3 floors. Also the height, I believe the height max is 40 feet, and we are proposing top of wall height of about 52 feet, and then we're gonna have about a 3-foot parapet that will extend up to the override of the elevator. So again, we're going over that allowable height a little bit. I think transparency was mentioned in the report, and I had done some calculations today that I'm happy to share. I don't know if anybody wants to hear all the percentages of transparency as it relates to the building, but I think the important one would be the east elevation, where the retail level we're achieving about 80% transparency along Michigan, and then above that about 50% plus, and the north elevation. Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're at about 47% along the north elevation, and then 30% above that. The rear elevation, the west elevation, is about 55% transparency and then 52% above. And then of course the south elevation, which doesn't have a real significant retail frontage, and it's kind of on that alley facing the adjacent building, but we're at about 36% at the first floor and 24% above. I think there's also some notes in the ordinance about breaking up the facade, and I think when you look at the elevations, of course, it's this alley elevation. We do have sort of some articulation at every 50-foot minimum. Certainly on the east elevation, where we kind of a bump out bay in that northeast elevation, and then on the back, the west, we're kind of articulating some bays at the upper levels that will also provide some protection at the patio and entrance to those first floor units on the west side. So I know those will certainly probably be up for discussion tonight. I think those were the main one. Chris, do you think, just looking through the report, I think that was the balance of the.
Yeah, I think so, John.
Yeah, and the unit sizes, I think qualify. I think our units now, after we've developed these designs a little bit more, we have a minimum size of about 715 square feet, and the largest unit is about 930. Varies a little bit from what you guys have seen. But yeah, that's the balance of the description. Certainly open for questions, but I don't know if Clement has some thoughts as it relates to the site and setbacks and that kind of thing. But again, I think it's fairly straightforward.
This is Bowers, and I just have a question. Are there any handicap accessible apartments in this building?
Yeah, all the units will be designed to a type B level. On the second floor, we're going to provide type A, which is fully accessible units. We have 1 2-bedroom, one bedroom on the second floor that will have the grab bars and all the floor area required. But like I said, every unit will be easily adaptable to accommodate. So we provide the floor areas and in anticipation of having to convert one of those units.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council before I open the public hearing? All right, Chris, anything else from your team before I open the public hearing?
I couldn't get unmuted. I had one question, and I didn't notice it on the plan. Is that alley that's to the south of their proposed building, is that their property? Is that alley going to stay? Are we going to have traffic from the parking area going out on Michigan Avenue there? Just a question.
Well, we currently at the site is designed to enter the parking for the residents off of Cherry. So I believe, Chris, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that alley is actually part of the neighbors.
Yeah, the first section of that alley, and Clement, correct me if I'm wrong also, but the alley directly south between us and the other building that's owned by the neighbor. But then at the rear where our parking lot is, it actually connects with a public alley where they could exit westbound.
Right.
Yes, the alley is public right of way. That's why we put a dumpster on the southwest corner of the site to be accessed directly from the alley, because that is public right of way. Right.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, I said Cherry. I meant Apple Street. I'm getting my route mixed up.
I knew what you meant.
Too many fruits.
That's right.
All right, are we ready to open the public hearing? All right, I will declare the public hearing open. If there's anyone that would care to speak to this, if you'll please raise your hand so I can see it. And when I call on you, if you'll identify yourself, and then we welcome your comments. No public comment. All right, I'll declare the public hearing closed and go back to the commission. Any additional questions? If not, what's your pleasure?
This is Mauer, and I do have a couple questions related to the parking. Rebecca, you referenced kind of a multi-unit parking clause that would allow the minimum of 21 parking spaces for this 21 unit mixed use or multiple use. How does that factor in for the resident or for the commercial side of things? I mean, isn't it, or wouldn't the Downtown Development Authority kind of prefer that main floor have some direct parking reserved areas?
Well,
And,
so,
and
yeah.
wouldn't that then cut into that 21 units?
Well, so exactly, the use itself is subject to the parking standards, just as you recited them essentially, right? The multifamily is 1.5 per unit, and then you get a certain square footage of the retail. So that's why they're actually by ordinance required to have quite a few more than what they're proposing. So you guys have the ability to sort of modify that. And I'm thinking if they were to go in just as a residential unit above the retail, right, they would be looking at 1 parking space per unit. So I think that is a rationale, right, for the PC to say, well, at the very least, they're providing 1 per unit, which is consistent with how we treat residential units above the stores in other parts of the downtown. So that would be a rationale. I think to your concern that while that might serve the residential component, but what does that mean for the retail space? Then I think the Planning Commission can find, if they so desire, that you find public parking in the area, on street and off street public parking, to be sufficient to deal with the 2,300 square foot of retail. So I think you could find that. You don't have to. I mean, I think if you look at this and say, I think you need more on-site or off-street parking, you certainly have the ordinance behind you on that. But I think it was designed to, I think it gives you some ways to consider circumstances that are really more tied to how you want to see your downtown develop, which is not doing a lot of individual off-street parking, if you have public parking in the area. So I think you're going to have to blend those, Tom.
Tom, if you look, the vast majority of our downtown retailers do not provide parking. Is this property in the parking assessment district?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
So they'll be paying the same assessment that other downtown businesses are paying to support the public parking.
Yeah, I'm just pre-thinking, when they have to start marketing and signing leases for the retail space, those people are going to want to weigh in. Those future tenants for the retail space are going to want to weigh in on having, close customer parking. And if they're all being kind of reserved or taken up for the residential, for the living units, then they're going to have to park across the street, or they're going to have to park elsewhere. Or if they do negotiate reserving a few spaces per tenant, then where do the residential people park? And the parking lot across the street of Apple, does that offer 24-hour parking, or is that limited to snow plowing restrictions and stuff?
Tom, to answer your question with the downtown, because that is in our parking assessment district, what happens is each year the use of the building, it's calculated how many parking spots they need. We then subtract how many parking sites are on site. And then from there, it's determined that whatever's in the building would need to use, let's say, in this case, let's say that they use them all for residential, they need 12 for the commercial, or they need 10 or whatever it is. And then that's basically saying they can use any 10 spots in the downtown area when they pay that assessment. And we do that for all businesses in the downtown, because there's really no way for the businesses in the downtown to be able to have on-site parking for their businesses.
I agree. And I understand that rationale. I'm just saying that once these potential lessees are looking at the retail space, a lot of our other buildings downtown have on-street parking directly in front of their storefronts. And in this case, that's not an option. And so the close proximity, the drive up, hop out, run into the store, run into that business, that becomes now of a planned out park somewhere and walk. And I'm just pre-thinking their next step. I mean, if it's all reserved for residential parking, then retail is going to suffer. And part of our focus has been to not necessarily throw out the commercial aspect, the retail aspect, while we're trying to redevelop our downtown.
And then Tom, that's the flexibility that the property owners have, because that building that's right next to it has the same issue. And it has retail in it as well.
Okay.
That there's no parking along there. So that becomes something that the developers or the property owners will have to deal with, how best to accommodate that.
And then I did partially ask about the parking lot across. Is that 24-hour parking, or is that limited to the season?
24-hour.
If they're going to use it as, if they want to use any of it as residential, we do have a procedure here at City Hall where what they would do is come down, get a parking pass. The resident would get a parking pass to hang on their car, which allows them to park in any all-day parking lot overnight.
Okay.
All right, other questions? So Rebecca laid out a couple of questions that we needed to address, the parking being the primary one. We've had that discussion. Second issue was one of building height. Jerry, did the fire department have any concerns?
I'll kick that to Dan, because Dan tracked that down.
Okay.
Yes, Roger had no issues with the project.
I can add though, Dave, that so building height was one of the unknowns as far as my review was. And building height is actually not one of the standards that the Planning Commission has the ability to waive. So you have the 4 stories is fine, but the building height standard in the district is 40 feet. And I'm not seeing, unless I'm missing it, I'm not seeing a provision in the B1 district that allows the PC to waive that. So that's going to be something that's going to require relief through the variance process, essentially, unless there's a provision in the ordinance I'm not aware of. Both the density, the fact that it's more than 8 units in the building, and the parking are PC waivable.
Just for my own knowledge, Rebecca, where is that 40-foot measured from?
Let me pull up the ordinance one. Normally that's clarified in the definition of building height, but let me find it specifically for you.
While you're doing that, let's talk briefly about the number of units. I say briefly because we've been aware since really the initial discussions and the response to the RFP that this building was going to exceed the number of units. And frankly, earlier discussion has been strongly supportive of that, given the rather dire need for additional housing in the city. Does anyone have any concerns that they'd like to express over the number of units? Okay.
I personally feel that that's the ideal design for where they want to put it. You know, it gets us what we want to do. We want to get people living downtown and still have the retail aspect. I don't see any real issue with the parking. You know, that was a concern at the council level, I think. But once that the sizes were given to us, you know, we really need to see what we can do to work with them on this. I think it's going to be a great project for downtown. It's one more, you know, once we get this done, we can do something with that parking lot behind the Waldorf, you know, and get things looking good again down there. That's kind of even that parking lot's kind of a eyesore right now. And I think with this building down there, it's going to really improve that area of our community. So I've been a positive supporter of this since it came to town, and I think we really need to work hard to get this done.
Thank you, Dave.
Make a comment. This is Rezegi here. I'd like to say that I think this design is actually better than the first design they came to us with. It is smaller, but I think it'll fit in that corner just perfect. That's at least my opinion. And the extra height, I'm all for that because that's going to give a little bit of shade to our a stoplight problem there on that box that we have every year with the sun hitting it. So maybe the stoplight will work all year now.
Thank you, John.
This is Mauer again. Lynn, when you asked about the where the height is measured from or referenced, were you talking about where it is in the code, or were you talking about how to actually calculate that 40 feet?
Yeah, so that's actually in the code, Tom. I think they're one and the same. So it by ordinance, it means the elevation measured from the average finished lot grade at the front of the building to the highest point of the roof.
Okay.
So
Right, and that's
like Barry's buildings there where the walk downs, it's basically an excavated basement. And I just wondered that's got to be over 40 foot there. So I didn't know where that 40 foot started from. So I appreciate you clearing that up. Is the building sprinklered?
Yes.
Okay, Chris says yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Foster,
Chelsea.
I just wanted to comment on the height. I think it'll fit in just fine. If you look kitty corner across that block, it's going to rival the roof line of the Waldorf, really. So I think it fits in just fine with the neighborhood.
I would agree. I think that's 40 foot factor may well be something that we need to take another look at.
I know Roger weighed in on this. Dave, maybe you know this. The other Dave Tospo, do you know what the height limitations are for our ladder truck?
Well, I've never been in the bucket when it ran out all the way. I've been up part way, and I don't know. You know, that's a question for Roger. I would think, you know, after watching the fire and the setup they had for the Royal Coach building, I think they can go. I think that thing will shoot higher than 40 feet.
That's what I think too. I just didn't know for sure.
Okay.
This is Clement Audu, the civil engineer. I've got a question for Rebecca regarding her review comments. Under section 90-474 B1 district regulations, and then item E, it says the subject site is surrounded by commercial B1, B3 zoning. Landscaping requirements do not apply. Could you elaborate on that? Does that mean we don't need to provide any landscaping plans for this project? Or because further down too on section 90-475 in the parking lot requirement, you said parking lot screening / landscaping is not required.
So, yeah, absolutely. So under 474, the subsection E that I referenced is a requirement that where B1 zoning abuts either residential or apartment district zoning or industrial zoning, that then the landscaping standards that are in the zoning ordinance apply. But in that you are in an area where you are surrounded by B1 zoning, then those landscaping requirements that are in the ordinance are not one of the requirements. That's not to say that you can't have landscaping or that that it might not be desired or desirous, but you're not subject to the particulars of the landscape requirements that are set forth in the ordinance. And then that's just reiterated in section 475, where they are referring to the parking lot standards, because the landscaping requirements also are sort of nestled into the parking lot standards. And same conclusion, where you're not subject to those standards.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay,
And just for your information, I've been in contact with Travis Tate, and I've exchanged plans over time, and he's reviewed the civil plans and has had comments which I've addressed. So all his comments, I believe, will be forwarded to the Planning Commission over time. But every comment so far has been addressed.
thank you. All right, what's your pleasure?
My only concern is the height. Other than that, I would make a motion to approve the request for special use permit. But we need to do, I don't know how we handle the height issue.
By referring it to staff to resolve, how that needs to be handled.
That's my resolution.
And you should include in that specifically our findings as to the adequacy of parking and the acceptability of the number of units. Anything else, Rebecca?
No, I actually think that's fine. By virtue of you approving the reduced parking plan, based on the findings that you had in your discussion, I think you are, by virtue of doing that, accepting that there are no carports or garages. You're finding that acceptable, because that's a requirement as well. So I think you're right, just by doing those two things on the number of units, the reduced parking plan, a finding that the applicant's presentation on the missing site design details that you find acceptable, that it's subject to compliance with the building height requirement unless variance approval is issued, and the review and approval of the city public services and fire department.
Rebecca?
Yeah.
Could we alternatively change the height requirement? I know we can't waive the height requirement, but can we change the ordinance?
Yeah. Yes, and that Dave would not have to change that motion, because your motion right now, right, is being done under the premise that you have a 40-foot height standard. And so you're saying that you got to comply with whatever's in the ordinance unless you get relief from that standard. And that's a true statement. And then if the PC goes in there in the interim and removes the standard or modifies the standard, it does not change the truth of that condition.
Okay. So I will deal with that. Changing the height restriction is a separate issue. So we have a motion on the floor approving the site plan with all of the specific findings that Rebecca has mentioned, so noted. Do we have support for that motion?
Bowers support.
Okay, we have motion by Tassava, support by multiple Rezegi. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Great, thank you very much. I certainly personally echo the mayor's comments about the desirability of this project for downtown and our well wishes. I'd now like to take a straw poll. How many of you would be in favor of amending the zoning requirement to increase that 40-foot maximum height?
I would.
I would.
Yes.
Yes.
Jordan?
I don't really know. I think it would take, I think this is a spot where we're
Not
changing-
doing it tonight. It's a question of whether we proceed to consider doing that.
right. And my thought is that it would feel like we're changing the rules to meet this one person, even though I know that's not what we're doing. When it comes to the height, I think it really should be a non-issue with this particular site plan, simply because it's at the bottom of a hill and doesn't really make a difference. Or, you know, that 50 feet is going to match, like Chelsea said, pretty much right up with what Waldorf is.
Well, I think that there are, certainly there is a limit to what maximum height that we want in order to avoid putting a space needle in the center of downtown that clearly
Right.
doesn't fit. But I'm not sure where 40 feet came from. It may well be that that was a limitation that was the result of the available firefighting capacity at the time that that ordinance was put in place. My own feeling is that 4-story is not inappropriate down there in most locations. So I would think that we could find a way to better word that so that rather than absolutely prohibiting it, it makes it something that we take into consideration, but have the ability to waive.
Yeah, that's the
I
thing, you
agree.
could add a provision to deviate, yeah.
So I think I saw, if not unanimous, near unanimous support.
You didn't ask me, but I'm in support. But can I have a quick question for Rebecca? If that max height wasn't in the ordinance, would it then be part of the site plan review?
No, if you had no standard, then the planning commission would not have the ability to pass judgment on the building height if the standard was 0 feet, no building height standard. Because right now you have.
I don't think that's what that's not
No.
what's being suggested.
No,
Yeah.
I know that.
But yeah, I think the idea, like you have with parking and with number of units, right? The idea is when you have these mixed use districts, is to give yourself the ability to consider the circumstances of the site and of the surrounding property, which is why you have it constructed the way you do. And so applying a similar approach to building height, might be desirable.
Okay.
So what I'm suggesting is that we direct Rebecca and staff to come back to us next month with a possible revision in the zoning code for the central business district that gives us the ability to look at buildings higher than 40 feet. We okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Dan.
Yep. Dan?
And this will be kind of a throw-out question to Rebecca also. Rebecca, would it be pertinent or advisable for the chair to set a public hearing for the April 5th meeting to consider a text amendment change to the B1 district as it pertains to building height, and then have staff make a recommendation for that meeting.
You certainly could, because your public hearing notice can be very general, right? All it has to say is that you're going to consider modifying the building height standard in the B1. And then what actually turns out to be the version that you end up recommending approval for, you know, you have the room to negotiate that at the public hearing. So if you're interested in moving it along at that pace, you certainly could do so.
Everybody okay with that?
Yes,
I
sir.
think, I
Yes.
think that's totally
Yes.
reasonable. I mean, we want the public's input on something like this, don't we?
Yes.
So, I mean, kind of want to see if the public wants us to move forward with something like this.
Okay, do we have a motion then to set a public hearing for our next meeting to consider a
make that motion.
modification? Moved by Brem, support by
Rezegi.
Rezegi. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed,
Aye.
same. Okay. Well, Chris, yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate everything that you're doing and your patience to work through all the associated delays that last year presented. So we wish you well.
Thank you, and big thanks to Jerry and Dan and Rebecca for all your help too. It's been a pleasure working with the city, and we're excited to get this thing rolling.
Great. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you, Chris and team.
Welcome.
Okay, we'll move on to the second public hearing, which is to solicit comment regarding a request for approval of a special use permit and related site plan for the establishment of a commercial kennel at 1005 East State Street. Dan, you want to kick this off?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the Planning Commission has been doing fantastic work, moving different items along. One of them was the commercial kennel issue in the industrial zoning district. As the Planning Commission determined and City Council approved, commercial kennels in the industrial area does make a lot of sense from a use standard. So Karen Zuver, obviously we've been working with her for a while since she's operated her doggy daycare at 1005 East State Street. Now to enhance and grow her business, she's looking to establish a commercial kennel at that location. Karen has worked directly with staff regarding her plan of operation, which has been included in your packet, as well as the site plan information. So with that, I can turn it over to Rebecca for any additional comments she has.
So, yeah, interestingly, I say interestingly, because sometimes when you have uses such as this, the big difficulty for the reviewing body is sort of the elements of the special use permit, because sometimes there are elements of the operation that seem impactful. So they put together a site plan that meets all the design standards, but what the Planning Commission is left to sort of wrestle with are the elements of the special use, which are those nuisance or impact related items. I would suggest that it might just be the opposite on this particular proposal. You have an operation already there operating. The boarding element or kennel element of it is not going to be adding anything to the building or to the outdoor operations, in the sense that they're not adding more runs, they're not adding building area, they're not doing anything from the special use standpoint criteria that would cause the Planning Commission, in my opinion, to conclude anything but positive on your special land use criteria. I do think when it comes to the site plan, there are a handful of design elements, and Dan's absolutely right. Karen, I know, has worked on getting you all of the information that you need. I think an updated plan even was forthcoming today. So I would say that from my report, you'll note that there are a handful of design elements that you need to conclude compliance on. And I would say that's probably going to be the focus of your discussion tonight, just to be comfortable that the parking standards have been met. And those are just some of the details that were kind of missing on the site plan, which then sort of prevented me from giving you a sort of a report that allowed you to just sign off. So I do think you're going to have to maybe concentrate on a couple of those design issues. But I am sure, since Karen has had the report, I'm sure she'll be able to speak to those and provide you with the information you need to let you do the second part of that, which is your site plan review.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
Karen, would you like to respond to the staff comments?
Yes. So I'm on the phone here. Hopefully that's better than what my microphone was in the past. So when I reviewed this with Dan and went through some of these things, first and foremost, we did go out and measure the area for parking, and it does accommodate for those 10 parking spots. There is no, it is all barrier-free parking from that standpoint. There are no curbs. Everything that I did here in the building when I went through and remodeled it, I made sure that it was handicap accessible. So everything here that is on the site plan, parking wise and structure wise, does allow for handicap accessibility with parking. And there are shared parking spaces that we work with Morgan Electric here at 1011 East State Street as well. So there is enough parking overall. The plan is late spring, early summer to pour additional, like an apron out in front of that, to make sure that the parking is a little bit easier than the crushed concrete that we have right now. So there is that. There is fencing along. If anybody's been by here, we put a lot of money into fencing, making sure that it's adequate for the dogs as they're out there playing. All sanitation is really a priority for me personally. That's one thing I want to take pride with my facility, is that it doesn't smell like dog whenever you're around it. So when that question arose, I do want to let you know that we do have a plan for sanitation and management with the dogs as well. Any questions regarding any of that, I'm willing to take at this time.
Okay, there may be some additional questions during the public hearing, but I don't see anything from the commissioners at this point. Anything else, Karen?
Yeah, there were some comments about lighting, and all of the lighting that is here does not exceed the fence boundary, and the cameras as well allow for complete visibility of the play yards as well as night vision visibility. And again, they don't exceed the fenced area of the play yards. From that perspective, I do have an entry camera right at the entry door, but nothing beyond that faces the street or anything in that regards that there would be any lights shining outside of that boundary area.
Okay, any questions for Karen at this point? If not, then I'll declare the public hearing open and invite anyone that would care to address us to please identify themselves. All right, seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed and ask again if there are any questions or concerns from commissioners. All right, if not, what's your pleasure?
I make a motion that we,
If I could, before Lois, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to just summarize for you then after Karen's summary, that was very helpful. I would suggest there are 3 remaining issues for you, and she might be able to speak to that. First of all, your ordinance requires that the parking area surface be either asphalt or concrete. So if a portion of that is gravel, that will be something that that you will need to speak to. Secondly, and I might have missed this, but you generally are going to want to understand and approve whatever the refuse disposal arrangement is. It's probably not different than how it exists now, but I didn't see it on the plan, and so you'll want to confirm that. And then you do have a couple of landscaping requirements that apply. Now, this gets a little interesting because I'm not exactly sure what might have been applied when the facility received approval to operate initially. So if the existing site is in compliance with the approved plan when the doggy daycare first went in, then this would not trigger the new standards. But if they didn't comply, or if they weren't applied, then they would apply now. So we'll want to work through those 3 things.
Okay. With regards to the parking area, yes, there is a portion of it that is asphalt and cement, and then I do plan on doing that later this spring to pour that apron out front. When the new driveway was put in, there were some limitations on what could be done right at that time. So we did put down crushed concrete to allow for ample drying of the soil when we do have water or what have you. As far as the landscaping, I wasn't told that I needed any additional landscaping. I do have some shrubbery out front. There is a tree line in the back. I did not remove those trees, even though my landlord suggested maybe we want to remove the trees. I did not. I kept the trees in there for purpose of noise reduction, privacy, and also, quite honestly, it's nice shade for the dogs in the summertime. So there is a tree line that is on the side, and again, it butts up to a woodlot behind us. So if you can see that on the site plan, but those trees are all there, with the exception of those which were removed by the tenants that are on the other side of me, where they took the house down and did some of that refurbishment on that site. But I was not required at the time to put any additional landscaping in when I originally started. Refuse management is just commercial trash removal on Tuesdays, and everything is maintained and double bagged in a nightly manner, where there is no refuse that is left outside overnight. It is all double bagged and retained in the containers that are outside the building, and then again picked up on a weekly basis.
Rebecca, what would be the length of time that we could go without that cement being poured? 24 months? I don't know what the restraint would be.
Yeah, you actually can, I think, because it does look like that's the only remaining outstanding issue. And you do have the authority to grant the special use permit and approve the site plan with a deadline for compliance with the paving requirement. Yeah.
Rebecca, can we actually accept the fact that that is a gravel lot? this is somewhat of a unique circumstance because that's a shared parking lot with the property owner that she rents from. He has the facility immediately next door, and his parking, with the exception of an apron by the doorways, is all gravel.
So all of that entire parking area, wherever people are parking, is gravel right now?
Yes.
So when this building was initially occupied with the doggy daycare, do you recall what action the planning commission took? I mean, what was relieved from the paving requirement already granted in some form?
Yeah, it was, I mean, my site plan was approved administratively. I had no additional comments in which I had to make any improvements to the parcel.
Is the parking parking layout that you're showing here on the plan, is that essentially the same parking layout that existed prior to you occupying the building?
Yes.
Yeah.
With the exception of the new entry driveway.
Yeah, but the parking area itself, that's pretty much what it
It's
looks like.
exactly what's been there for many years. Excuse me for answering, but I happen to be acquainted with the prior owner of the building and what he had in there.
What was the prior use of the building?
It was a tool and die operation.
Okay, so I'm thinking out loud here. So actually, at such time as the applicant went in there with the doggy daycare is when the paving should have been required under the ordinance because it constituted a change in use, which is not the case now. So I'm feeling a little comfortable with the planning commission saying that although the boarding element is requires approval, it is an expansion of an existing use. And on that premise, you're willing to accept, especially with no building additions or no increase in intensity of use. And for that reason, your finding is that it doesn't trigger the paving requirement. So I would say you could say that because technically it should have been required back when she first. And so rather than going back to that, I think maybe you look at this and say there's no change, no change is being proposed, and so it doesn't trigger it. If that's what I'm hearing that the planning commission is feeling how they want to proceed.
I guess to me that makes sense.
I would agree. I think she's done nothing but beautify the property, improve it. Not a major change in use here.
That works for me, Dave. She hasn't made any major changes in her business. We allowed her to do it, start up the way she is. We should continue to let it go. If we were gonna change it, we should have changed it in the beginning.
All right. Forgive me, I've lost track. Did we have a motion on the floor?
There's a motion from Bowers, but no support yet.
I'll support it.
I interrupted her.
Who said
Okay.
that they'll support?
Jordan.
Lois, will you modify the motion to incorporate what Rebecca has just stated?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, now
I'm
we have
gonna
a
need help
modified,
because there's an
we have
awful
a
lot of
modified
modification.
motion on the floor. Is there support?
Yes, still.
Okay, so we have a motion by Bowers, support by Brem. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay, Karen, congratulations. Thank you very much, and good luck with the project.
Well, thank you all so very much for your support as well. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to the third public hearing. Purpose of this is to solicit comment on adding commercial recreation facilities as a permitted use in the D1 industrial zoning district. Dan?
Yes, thank you, Dave. Yes, a couple months ago, the Planning Commission added or recommended adding commercial recreational facilities as a definition to section 90-1. And at that time, to clean up the B1 and B2 district regulations of permitted uses, the definition of a commercial recreational facilities were added to the B1 and B2 district. This now would be a recommendation to text amendment change to the D1 industrial zone, allowing commercial recreational facilities as a permitted use in the D1 and subsequently the D2 districts. So you've already been kind of working on this process. Obviously, there's an interested party that has extreme amount of interest in the possible construction of a commercial recreational facility in the D2 area. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Dave.
Okay, Rebecca, anything you want to
No,
add
I
at this
have
point?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. What's your pleasure? We've already dealt with the change in the definition, which has gone to city council and has been approved.
You do have to open the public hearing, Mr. Chairperson.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you, Jerry. I will open the public hearing. If anyone has any comments, please indicate and share your thoughts with us. Okay, seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed and resume my prior thought.
Adding line Q, is that the only bolded text? My copy here, kind of, it's difficult to see what's bolded and not bolded.
Yes, Tom. Q is
Okay.
the only bolded item there.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the change, and do we need to forward it to council?
Bowers, support.
Okay, moved by Brem, support by Bowers. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to old business. Jerry, anything on JPA, JPC?
Nope, JPA and JPC did not meet in the month of February.
Dan, work task list.
The two items that we'll be discussing a little bit further regarding accessory dwelling units and duplexes in residential neighborhoods were added, and we'll be discussing those in a little bit.
Okay, tracking report.
Really no material change to the tracking report for this month.
All right, then we'll move into item D, which is a discussion of the revised draft ordinance regarding the keeping of chickens. Dan, you or Rebecca gonna take the lead on this?
Rebecca, go ahead and take the lead on this if you would.
Right. So I went in and revised the draft text that you considered in February based on the very specific edits that the PC requested. I have reflected those edits in bold text. And I probably should highlight a couple of things where, although they are in response to the PC's request, I did sort of use a little bit different approach in making those edits. So on page 1, that's simply the exception of the RR district where it was discussed that we didn't want to, overrule what was already being allowed in the RR. And then on page 2, which is where the bulk of the changes are, is really where the Planning Commission spent a lot of their discussion time in terms of, what that coop should look like, what kind of standards should apply, and whether or not the pen should include the entire rear yard or not, et cetera. So I went in here and did some modifications to address or respond to those concerns. So I've gone ahead and added some language where the covered enclosure, because I think there was some confusion there, not confusion, but I think it was raised that using the term covered enclosure and fenced enclosure could be confusing. So coop and pen are really words to describe those two. And then to actually create the standards that apply just to the coop and pen. Subsection 3A is the same as was presented. Subsection B, actually giving a height and a square footage for the coop and pen, is totally new. The numbers or the metrics were not offered by the Planning Commission, but the Planning Commission did express concern that they felt there probably should be some height or size standards, wondering if they should be what the accessory building standards are or not. And I felt like it was cleaner to not include them in the accessory building design standards, and so applied this. And this is a standard similar to what I found in many of the chicken ordinances, but it can certainly be anything you want, or you can remove it altogether. Subsection C, no change, and subsection D, adding the materials that the Planning Commission expressed that they wanted added. And then also the requirement that there should be a cover. That was also raised by the Planning Commission. And then the last change is in subsection 5, where initially I had put an ordinance number there, but I was not able to find where you actually had an ordinance that covered these things. So I thought maybe putting a statement such as this was more inclusive and could then include anything that you either had existing or were to adopt in the future as it relates to nuisance ordinances. And so it would be a little more, a little more broad reaching that way. So hopefully I have included everything that the Planning Commission indicated and have done so satisfactorily.
Rebecca, do we need to specifically state that the coop is not an accessory building?
Yeah, that's probably a good point. We can add a provision that the coop and the pen are not subject to the accessory structure standards or something to that effect.
I would think that would be.
Really, yeah, that's probably a good point.
So I have just a general question, I guess. In section 3B, is 6 feet pretty normal for a coop? I know that specifically, if I had to say 6 feet, I would be stooping to get inside it, say to get eggs or whatever.
So that was, Jordan, you said that, right?
Yes.
So actually the 6 foot and the 80 square foot, I initially read, the very first place I read it was in the MSU extensions information that you can get if you are getting ready to raise chickens. And they have information that they obviously provide, right, to people on these kinds of things. And so this is what they had offered as a standard size. I did see it in a couple of ordinances after that, and I'm sure it's just communities, right, tapping into the MSU extension and using that. But I don't know that it's any more magical than that. So I think it really should be whatever the community feels, best serves them.
This is Mauer. I think the 6 foot should be increased to 8 foot. I know there's a couple styles of coops that I'm familiar with. In fact, I currently have one where it's a raised coop. It's got a false bottom for cleaning. And so it already starts about 1.5 feet higher than what normally it would be. So that would be my suggestion, is that we not limit it to 6 feet. And then under the same section 3, paragraph D, when we talked about netting and some of the other materials, the way I'm reading it, netting and metal or fiberglass are prohibited or are allowed.
Prohibit the use of those or similar materials is prohibited.
See, I would think that netting and, some type of metal, galvanized corrugated metal to make the coop or to make the roof out of those, to me, would seem to be reasonable materials, especially the netting as a roof or as a enclosure mechanism for the actual pen. Rather than putting a rigid roof over the pen, putting a net over it would be reasonable. Those are my only 2 suggestions.
Yeah, I have
Other
to agree.
comments?
I have to
Jordan?
agree with sorry, Jordan. I agree with the 8 feet for B. That seems more reasonable than 6 feet. And I agree with Tom on the use of netting as a top of the pen, at least, also, definitely.
I had also just zeroed in on the metal and the thoughts that, you see a lot of metal netting. I don't know what you call that, but it seems like a common chicken coop fencing that's actually metal. So maybe just
Chicken
that
wire.
word. Chicken wire. There we go.
Okay, other comments? All right. Is there essentially agreement on changing the 6 feet to 8 feet? Show of
Yes.
hands, please. Okay, we have consensus on that. Do show of hands again, who would favor allowing netting to be used as the top panel for the pen? Okay, we have a majority.
Dave, I got a comment on that, please. Yes. The last time we brought this up, we talked about it. And I think what happened at the last meeting, when we talked about it, I thought that the pen and the coop were kind of combined. And I don't know if we want to split this out. The coop the coop can be built with metal, I would think, metal roofing. And then have a separate section for the pen that says that it has to be a certain size, like 80 some square feet in area. But I think we really need to consider the netting on it, because like Tom said, I see this all over the place. You know, I've got some netting on my camper up north to kind of keep the sun from shining into the camper. This stuff is pretty decent. It's good shape, and it lasts a long time. So I think the netting, it's just a comment, because I agree, and my hand was up on the netting. So, but just a little information there.
Well, I would agree with you, Dave, that I think that we probably want to separate the coop from the pen in terms of allowable materials. Thinking that a coop is going to be a more substantially enclosed unit as opposed to a pen, which is more of a fenced yard with some type of top.
Right.
You don't think that netting should be a specific kind, David? I mean, when you say netting, that's a pretty broad statement.
Yes, I understand.
And I think
I'm
it's
trying
okay
to
if
avoid,
you-
I'm trying to avoid writing a book.
Can I get back on maybe some definitions?
Sure.
I just went through my directory dictionary app and typed in coop, and it says it's an enclosure, cage, or pen. I think what we're trying to do is define, like the nest boxes by using the word coop, and probably shouldn't. The coop, I think, that we're trying to define really is a nest box. That's where the hens go. That's where they lay their eggs. They sleep in there at night. That's their safe haven. But then the pen or the enclosure is kind of their foraging area.
Correct.
And a 10-foot by 8-foot foraging area is not very big.
It's not very big, but with only maximum of 6 chickens, it's within, I thought it was up to 6. It was maximum of 4 for half acre, 5 if it's a half to 1, and 6 if it's an acre or larger. So the potential of 6 chickens, that's probably within Michigan State's guidelines. I think it's a little small, but it's probably within their guidelines. I just think, if we're going to start defining things, we probably should be a little bit more careful about defining them accurately.
So Tom,
Go ahead, Rebecca.
In the opening provision, Tom, in number 3, the intent, so maybe that needs to be reworked, but the intent there was to provide that,
Yes.
sort of a simple definition, right? That that the covered enclosure, like you say, the nesting bag is the coop, and then the fenced enclosure is the pen. And I thought, so there is where I define coop and pen, and then throughout the rest of it, use the term coop and pen.
Right.
So are you feeling like maybe where I offer that in that opening statement, that needs to be reworded?
I do, just based on this definition, because they're using the word coop to mean essentially everything. They're saying it's an enclosure, a cage, or pen, usually with bars or wires, in which fowl or other small animals are confined, for fattening and transportation. They're calling the coop essentially any space where those animals live, bed down, or roam.
So, but this does not.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we can set our own definitions.
Thank you.
So I think, yeah, I guess, Rebecca, I think, what you've done with the introductory paragraph in terms of differentiating what we consider a coop and a pen is fine, but we probably need to divide D into two parts so that we define what's acceptable for the coop versus what's acceptable for the pen.
Okay, sounds good. Makes sense.
Okay, given that discussion, are we ready to go ahead and set a public hearing for our next meeting?
Yes, I would make a motion to set the public hearing for the next meeting.
Also,
Motion by Bram. We have support.
Foster, support.
Support by Foster. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item E, which is a discussion of the information and draft text provided by Rebecca regarding accessory dwelling units. Rebecca?
Yeah, so.
Nice work.
No, well, thank you. I hope you found, I think it's just very interesting. So pages 1 through 9 really are excerpts from different planning related articles that I think just do a really good job of sort of explaining and defining accessory dwelling units. And they do so, although they use similar language, they sort of have different angles on it. So I included more than one just because I think it gives a really nice overview of how they're used and what they consist of. Then I give you a handful of sample ordinances, some for townships, some for urban areas, to give you a sense of, you can sort of see just by reading them, those that were more recently drafted and those that are a little bit older, because some, you can see the level of detail and specificity changes depending on sort of how sophisticated it is and whether it's new or old, and also the type of community. So I thought you might find that of interest as well. Then in speaking with Dan, he really thought that you were ready for to actually look at draft text that might be very specific to the city. And so I went ahead and just put something together just based on my understanding of ADUs and what you may or may not be interested in. And I gave you a first draft of that for your consideration. The very last page where I say related zoning ordinance amendments, that's really just an added note that you would go into whatever district you were going to be allowing them, you would go into that district and amend that district to include that as an allowed use. But then the actual standards for that use are set forth in the provisions specific to ADUs. So that's sort of the construct of the material I gave you. I know it's a lot, and you may very well just want to talk about it, but if you have specific questions, that's cool too. I'm ready.
Okay. Well, my first question is, given when you received this, am I correct in assuming that you would like the next month to reflect on it before we try to determine any specific course of action? And then my second question is, I think that to the extent that you have questions for Rebecca, we ought to go ahead and try to address that.
May I make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I've looked over some of this stuff and, it all seems adequate to me, and I would like a little bit more time to go over it before we set anything even in stone. But most of the stuff that I see here, Rebecca, is stuff that we are going to build in the future maybe, or that don't exist. There's a lot of accessory buildings out there right now that did exist with apartments in them, and they were shut down about 10 years ago. None of this refers to any of that.
So, John, the way the ordinance is drafted, specifically right now, without any change to it, the way it's drafted is that an accessory dwelling unit would be an allowed use in any accessory building, existing or proposed. So to your point, it would be allowed in an existing one, as long as certain conditions were met. And those are key. So you're with this particular draft, it's suggesting that it can only be allowed on a lot that is occupied by a single family home. And that one of the two, either the accessory dwelling unit or the single family home, has to be owner occupied. But other than that, I mean, those are kind of the two main things, right?
Right.
But other than that, then there are design standards, obviously. But if it's really designed to allow a person, if they had an accessory building, to either use all of it if it met the size standards, or a portion of it. The only thing you'll see that I made some notes in red for you guys to sort of ruminate over, because like, for instance, you guys have an accessory building height limitation that may very well make using a second story of an accessory building as an ADU, it might make that impossible. So that would be something to think about, right? Do you not care about that, or do you want to look at a taller building? Also, because this standard, rather than giving a specific number of a size for an accessory dwelling unit, it relates it to the size of the single family home. So I just referenced some of your size standards. So, but John, I think that's a really good, concern that you're expressing, because the idea is to allow people to use either an existing accessory building, or to actually construct an accessory dwelling unit, either one.
Okay.
Have we had requests, Dan, for this? Have them?
For the accessory dwelling uses,
The accessory building or a duplexes?
duplexes,
We've got many of them.
yeah, we've had requests from builders in the past year and a half for duplex construction. The issue has been the locations where they had planned on building those were not on a state highway,
Right.
so they didn't conform.
But what about existing homes? Have you had a request?
Just recently we have of converting a single family residence into a duplex. But again, the location of the single family home was not on a state highway.
So in essence, if you were to change that, take the highway out of the parameters, can that be done?
If planning commission recommends that text amendment change and city council approves it, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that there has been a significant amount of interest in how do we create more housing units. the Chamber, the Economic Development Alliance, Blue Zones, the Manufacturers Council, on and on, have all expressed deep concern with the lack of particularly affordable housing units in the community. And we've heard that on a number of occasions. So this is one way to address that. But, you know, Lois, what you're inquiring about, you know, allowing additional flexibility in duplexes, yeah, is certainly, that's contained within this, but it would be a step less far than what is being proposed here. I think another discussion that we're likely going to need to have is going beyond duplexes to multifamily units, because while you are certainly correct that we have a lot of duplexes that are not currently permitted by code, we also have a fair number of multifamily that are not permitted by code.
Right, I have 3 of them up by me.
Yes.
Right.
They're all over town.
Yep.
You only have to drive down the street and look at them, the number of cars parked in the yards or the driveways, to draw a pretty good conclusion as to how many people are living in those structures.
All over town.
Can I ask a kind of a general pre-thinking question? If this is allowed, if we pursue, you know, this avenue, does it create some challenges for zoning? I mean, it's got to be the same owner allowing or building or adding on to his house, either detached or an attached exterior or an attached interior type building, but there are potentially 2 different families. I mean, there are 2 different essentially mailboxes. Maybe they're not 2 different properties, but does the second use occupants have some of the same rights for well, like raising chickens or other uses in that same zoning district, or is it still strictly fall back on the main property owner? Rebecca?
Well, specific to the chickens, you only allow that where there's a single family owner occupied home. So for a house that had an ADU, it wouldn't qualify.
What if they wanted to add a deck and maybe it was in a setback? And again, it comes down to the original owner, maybe, but it's a renter. It's a potential leaseholder that have some rights to some of the normal same privileges of housing, don't they?
Well, except those are 2 separate things. Any ADU is still subject to zoning. So any setback, unless there's a specific setback standard in the ADU provision, they're going to be subject to the setback standards that apply in the zoning ordinance in that district. So the zoning doesn't care who's asking for the permit to build a deck on the ADU. You're assuming it'd be the property owner, whether they live in the ADU or the home, doesn't matter. But from a zoning perspective, the process and the standards are the same.
Okay.
Other questions for Rebecca tonight? Otherwise, I would suggest that we table this for continued discussion at our next meeting.
Do you need a motion, David?
Yes,
I make a motion, this is tabled until next meeting.
Rezegi, support.
okay, we have a motion and support to table. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same. Okay. So done. And I assume that we're in the same position with item F regarding two-family dwellings. Again, if there are questions for Rebecca at this point, I think, I would encourage you to ask them. Otherwise, I'll accept a motion to also.
I make a
table.
motion that's tabled also. Bowers.
We have
Bauer
support.
support. Bauer.
Okay, we have a motion by Bowers, support by Mauer to table this. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay. Item number 8, new business. Every year, we're required to present a report to the council as to our activities for the year. Dan has prepared that. Dan, without reading it to us, anything you want to point out?
No, you recapped it very well. Section 2-149 subsection D of our Code of Ordinances requires Planning Commission to compile a year in review and forward on to City Council.
Any questions for Dan?
I think
To some
we've been
degree,
very
this is-
busy.
Pardon?
I said, I think we had a busy year.
We did have a busy year, and actually, since most of what we do gets referred to council for their approval anyway, not to mention the fact that they get our minutes, I don't think there's too much here that isn't redundant, but being required, we certainly don't want to shirk our responsibilities.
In that case, this is Jordan. I make a motion to forward this to City Council.
Support.
Moved and supported. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same. Dave, we hope they enjoy their reading. All right, item B under new business is a request to schedule a public hearing for next month to review a special use permit and site plan review for organization called Starting Over for Success regarding a property located at 1028 North Michigan. They are looking to establish transitional housing.
Does this go, David, with what we had before?
I was
You know-
about to ask Dan the same thing,
Okay.
Lois, so I don't know. Dan, what are we
Yes.
dealing with?
Yep, this is in relationship to the transitional housing ordinance. Planning Commission approved back in 2018. This is the first such request that I'm aware of from a potential applicant for transitional housing. I actually had a conversation with two of the representatives from Starting Over for Success this morning in my office. They have a purchase offer on the table right now for 1028 North Michigan. Jerry Zarnicki's provided them with the section of the code which deals with transitional housing. I was with them this morning to look at the GIS map from the county to try to do some radius drawings on the map in putting this house in the center. They're going to be doing a little bit more reviewing because the ordinance does state 1,500 feet from schools, adult daycare centers, and there's a few other uses in the ordinance that it pertains to. So they're actually going to be doing some more detailed work to see if this home would even qualify for transitional housing based on our current ordinance. So I did give them the timeline of when we would have to publish the public hearing and send out the 300-foot letters to the surrounding property owners. So it would be prudent to set the public hearing, understanding that by March 14th, I believe, they may or may not, they will have given me notice by that time whether they would like to pull that public hearing off the table for the April meeting.
What is the nature of the population that they are seeking to provide transitional housing for?
It would be not CSC folks. It would be the folks who are out on out on work release, who are employed. They're looking, I believe, for 4 residents and then a manager on site. So the exact nature of the transition would not be sexual or violent in nature, but it would have to conform, obviously, with planning commission requirements.
And is this anything to do with the Serenity House?
No, this is a separate organization. I believe it was the Hope House. And Jerry, go ahead, or Dave Tassava, go ahead and interrupt me if I'm not getting that name correct. I believe it was Hope House, but that apparently that organization has been disbanded, and the Starting Over for Success has replaced them with a new board of directors.
So is this the successor organization to the organization that was attempting to create a transitional housing unit that was in front of us before?
Yes.
Okay.
Is Van Leer involved in it? He was the other one.
No. No.
It was quick.
Right. No, he is not involved in this project or with this 501c3 nonprofit.
Okay, what's your pleasure? Willing to set a public hearing?
Just toss, I'll make that motion.
Motion by Tassava, support by
Rezegi.
Rezegi. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same. Okay, so done. Open public discussion and comment. If anyone would care to address the commission, if you please raise your hand and I'll allow you 3 minutes for comment. Patty?
I came for just the first part to hear about the development at the old Moose site, but I decided to stay and listen to the rest. And boy, you guys have an interesting set of circumstances. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate your interest. So thank you. Other comments? Hearing none, commission comments?
I'd like to make a comment. I think we got our work cut out for us for this year.
No question about it. And the 2 items, E and F under old business, I think are of significant importance to the community, and we do have some work cut out for us.
Yes.
Dave?
You talking to me?
Well, you clicked your mic on. I thought maybe you had some
Well,
astute words for
I
us.
want to thank you. I want to thank you and the planning commission for your hard work this year. It's been a difficult year with all our restrictions, I think we're doing pretty good with these Zoom meetings, unlike the city council, we haven't been bombed on this board yet, but I do appreciate everything everybody's doing, and I wish us all well for this year. I think we, like John said, we got a lot of work cut out, and I think we're going to do the city's business, and we'll do it well, I think. I thank everybody individually.
Thank you, Dave. Other comments?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you. Who supported that?
Rezegi.
Okay, motion by Bowers, support by Rezegi, that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Oh,
Good night.
same.
Good night.
We are adjourned. Good night, all. Thank you very much.